Hello and welcome to Last Mixtape. My name's Stephen White, and on this week's show, we turn our attention to Ireland, Israel, music, and the politics of playing the game. But first,
I hope that culture is upstream of politics. I think it is. So I think the state of mind that culture creates in people encourages or provides a frame on which within which people can operate and politicians can operate. But I don't know that that's true. It's an act of faith.
not my words, but the words of Brian Eno. Indeed, in a world where all eyes are on the Republic of Ireland national football team and whether or not they will play Israel in the UEFA Nations League, this week we will dive into whether or not culture is upstream of politics and whether or not boycotts can inform them. Music, sport, culture and art are intertwined. They're homoousian. They are all of the same stuff. And how we present our art and where we present our art is incredibly, incredibly important. This week we delve into cultural boycotting and whether or not it has a say. Let's dive in. The Republic of Ireland's national football team, being drawn against Israel in the UEFA Nations League, has once again pushed Irish culture to the forefront of cultural boycott against the Israeli government's continued genocide, oppression and displacement of the Palestinian people, sparking debate on the effectiveness of the boycott itself. Since the announcement, calls for Ireland to boycott the match have surfaced on social media, in political commentary and of course online. The question of course isn't merely about a game of football, but rather the debate of the use of sport, music, art, comedy and culture to whitewash genocidal and oppressive regimes. Whether on the pitch or on the stage, performances become political. Ireland's football team faces the same dilemma, and it's a question musicians around the world have been grappling with for decades. The modern idea of cultural boycotts emerged during apartheid in South Africa. In 1985, artists united against apartheid, featuring Peter Gabriel, Bob Dylan, Bono, amongst others, and led by Stephen Van Zandt, released Sun City, a protest song explicitly calling out musicians such as Queen, Rod Stewart, Frank Sinatra, and more, who performed at the eponymous resort, a nominally independent region created by the apartheid government. The message was clear: if you performed there, you helped normalise a system built on racial oppression. Over the following decade, hundreds of artists refused to perform in South Africa. The boycott did not end apartheid on its own, but historians like Tom Lodge argued it helped shape international perception and reinforced economic and political sanctions. The lesson? Culture is never neutral. Even one concert can send a signal about legitimacy, solidarity, or even compliancy. Today, the question repeats itself in Israel. Some artists have refused to perform there. Fontaine's DC citing solidarity with Palestinian civilians. And Roger Waters, often controversial on the subject, has long refused to perform in Israel, framing his stance as part of a non-violent protest against state policy. Those who reject the boycott include Nick Cave. Radiohead played Tel Aviv, stating in a press release, "Performing is not an endorsement of any government policy." This presents a clear philosophical split. Withdrawal as a moral signal, or presence as dialogue or engagement. Both positions assume culture carries weight beyond entertainment. The dilemma is not identical in sport, but it is analogous. When a national football team steps onto a pitch, it represents more than its players. It represents the flags raised, anthems played, broadcast coverage spans continents. Every match becomes a projection of state identity. A band performing in the same country doesn't carry a national flag, but it still produces soft power, tourism, media coverage, and a perception of normal life. Political science call this cultural diplomacy. As Joseph Nye defines it, soft power is the ability to shape the preferences of others through appeal and attraction rather than coercion. The question for Ireland and musicians at large becomes, is there a meaningful difference between a stadium or an arena, between a match and a concert, or is all performance in some way a political act? Ireland has long had a complex history with questions of occupation, colonialism and national identity. The country's own colonial experience under Britain to the troubles in the north of Ireland has shaped a strong narrative of solidarity with other nations experiencing the same oppression. This historical lens informs how many Irish people view the conflict in Gaza. That sentiment is also reached in the arts. In 2023, Fontaine's DC explicitly framed their refusal to perform in Israel as a statement rooted in the empathy for marginalised communities. The trial of Niqab's Mukhara also mirrors this perception with the north of Ireland. But the Irish context is not monolithic. Some commentators argue that boycotts risks oversimplifying complex geopolitical realities. This raises a central question. When Ireland's football team plays Israel, does that signal tacit approval? When an Irish band performs, is that complicity? In both cases, the underlying issue is perception. Culture, history, and the national identity all converge to shape meaning. For a post-colonial nation like Ireland, every act on a global stage carries the weight of memory, empathy, and expectations. In other words, the Irish lens magnifies the stakes. For artists and athletes alike, performing is never neutral. It is a statement about who Ireland chooses to stand with and how it interprets its own moral legacy. When delving into the cultural boycott, there is one moment, and a very famous moment in Irish history, that I kept coming back to. And it was in 1984 at the Dunnes Stores supermarket on Henry Street in Dublin, where a young worker named Mary Manning took a stand and refused to handle grapefruit imported from apartheid South Africa. Her single act of defiance led to a greater strike that would last 3 years. And with the support of fellow staff and the union itself, those workers stayed on strike for 3 years at reduced wages to take a stand and say no. Here in Ireland, when it came to South Africa and the apartheid, just like we were speaking about with Palestine, they took a stand because they saw themselves in it. There was a shared empathy of the working class Irish people with that of the people of South Africa who were being oppressed under an apartheid regime. Workers in a supermarket on Henry Street in Dublin, miles upon miles away. Through their sterling work, the Irish government finally banned imported goods from apartheid South Africa. It's an incredibly powerful moment in Irish history because it shows that shared empathy, that willingness to stand up to oppressors. Nelson Mandela visited Ireland. He said of the strikers, "Ordinary people, far from the crucible of apartheid, cared for our freedom." And Mary Manning and her co-workers made a difference. Even more recently, with the Eurovision in 2026, Ireland's refusal means that they will not be taking part in one of the biggest songwriting contests in the world, on the grounds of the genocide of the people of Palestine and their treatment by the Israeli government. That is a big move for a lot of artists and even fans here in Ireland who would normally watch the Eurovision. This is something that they deeply care about, but they would not let it get in the way of doing and saying what's right. In that moment, the Irish songwriters, or people who may have had dreams of participating in the Eurovision, have said no. Again, like the Dunnes Stores boycott, it's a small moment and a small gesture in the grand scheme of things, but it does matter. Where does that leave the Republic of Ireland football team? I like to use this quote quite a bit, and I attribute it to Neil Atkinson of the Anfield Rap because he's the person I've heard say it. So Neil Atkinson is the person I'm going to quote for it. But football is the most important of the least important things. And I like to think of the same way about music. Indeed, being a Liverpool fan and growing up on stories of the great socialist manager Bill Shankly, that kind of notion of, like the Dunnes Stores workers, of working class people making a stand and making a difference and having their voices heard, is something that actually the people of Ireland share with the people of Liverpool. I know that there may be Man United and Arsenal fans here watching that may not agree with that, but it's always something and a kinship I always felt. The FAI and the government and the Minister for Arts or the Minister for Culture, those people can go fuck themselves. And as you may know, I'm a big communist woke lefty, and I don't like any politicians or really organisations such as the FAI, to be perfectly honest with you. These people are usually snivelling bureaucrats who take all the joy out of the world itself. So whether or not they think the footballers should participate in the game is completely separate from the reality of those footballers playing the game. It's up to those footballers what they think. Do they think boycotting the game is the right thing? Maybe they stand on the pitch and do nothing. Maybe they simply let the football game happen around them. Maybe they don't show up and refuse to play. Maybe they follow the Norwegian model of playing the game but donating the funds of the game to Palestinian relief charities. All of these things are possible, but a stand of some sort is needed. As we go back to the quote at the beginning from Brian Eno, these things are upstream of politics and they do inform it. What we love, what we enjoy, and what entertains us is in itself political because it is what we are driven to. The boycott is important, especially in this game. As I say, all eyes are on the Republic of Ireland, and because of our history, what we do is an extension and a reaction to that history. All of this means that small acts, no matter how inconvenient, eventually matter. They all feed down into politics itself. It's always worth remembering that we are the politics, not the politicians. They may represent us. They may stand in government houses and argue with each other for little clips on TikTok. But we are ultimately the ones that decide. And those footballers themselves are citizens. And it'll be up to them, not the FAI, not the Irish government, what they do on that football pitch, or if they do anything at all. Much like those strikers in Dunstores, they have a say. They might be small. In the grand scheme of things, you're just one person, 12 people, 10 people, thousands of people in a further discussion. But you're implementing yourself within it. What it's all really about is whether or not you're willing to bear the cost of what a boycott or a strike means. How strong are your convictions? That is the question being asked of the Republic of Ireland national football team, but also musicians in the Eurovision and musicians being asked to play in Tel Aviv.
Similarly, when artists choose to perform in Israel, the concerts often unfold like any other. Tickets are sold, lights up, encores are delivered. And yet the controversy never fully disappears, because the debate is not really about a single fixture or a single tour date, it's about meaning. The cultural boycott movement from apartheid era South Africa to contemporary Israel rests on consistent principle that legitimacy is shaped by participation. That when international artists or national teams appear in a country facing accusations of human rights violations, their presence can contribute, intentionally or not, to the image of that country, or put a curtain over the reality of what is happening beyond it. Opponents argue something equally principled, that culture should remain a space for exchange, that engagement is not an endorsement, and such attention brings us back to Ireland. For a country whose own history is marked by colonial struggle, international solidarity carries symbolic weight. Decisions on a global stage, whether in diplomacy, music or sport, are interpreted through historical memory, and indeed the public interpret them in the same way. What happened to the Irish under British rule is analogous to that of the Palestinians in Israel. It is why that shared history brings us closer together. So when those Irish players, those Irish people face the Israeli team, the debate is not simply strategic or athletic, it is interpretive. What does participation signal to those outside it? And what does it signal to the people who are being oppressed? It's a difficult decision for any team or any person or artist to come to. But in a global media ecosystem, perception travels faster than it ever has. A football match can become a headline as much as a concert a statement. Silence can become a position, but it also can become an omission. In a world where culture is political, whether you like it or not, Ireland's draw against Israel forces the same questions musicians have been grappling with for years. Does performing in a contested space legitimise the power there of it, or challenge it? There may never be a consensus or an agreement. The era of cultural innocence is far over, and once we accept that, every appearance on pitch or on the stage carries a consequence and is in and of itself political. To rob a line,
and so it goes, and there it went. The cultural boycott through the lens of the Irish national football team and their game against Israel in the UEFA Nations League. And indeed, music, Eurovision, art and culture at large. But what do you think? What do you think of the cultural boycott? Are you for it? Are you against it? Is it more nuanced? And do you think that culture, as Brian Eno says, is upstream of politics and it informs it? Comment down below and let me know. And as always, if you could like, share and subscribe to the channel, that would be a great help as always, and I'd be eternally grateful. But hey, I'll see you next week.
So we had got a union instruction not to handle South African goods, and when we all decided, the girls were out on strike here now, and some of the girls who were in work and decided that we wouldn't handle the goods. And when I refused to handle them, the rest of the girls had been refusing to handle them as well, but there's a man dressed behind my register when I actually refused, and I was brought up to the office and told I was given a few minutes to think about what I was after doing, and I didn't change my mind, and then they suspended me then indefinitely until I came back in and handled the goods.